The Enneagram is not an excuse for bad behavior.
Right.
Like, you can never blame that on the Enneagram because that is the opposite of what it's encouraging you to do. And even tied in with what you said about the 8, the best of every type is the person you can't type.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Keep What You Earn. I'm really excited because today we're diving into a bit of a more fun topic, I think, than your typical tax tips that I drop on a weekly basis. And I have a very special guest with me, Lindsey. Lindsey Lewis is here. Lindsey, say hi to everyone and just quickly introduce yourself.
Hey, well, I'm so happy to be here. I've been listening to your podcast lately and gaining tips for myself. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I've got 2 girls, teenager and toddler. So our life is busy and exciting and full of tantrums. And we just love Louisville. I've been studying the Enneagram for right about a decade, and I've just kind of gotten obsessed with it. And so that's actually my job. I work for a local nonprofit, helping lead workshops and co-host a podcast. And just, I love talking about the Enneagram. I feel like if you love it, you love it. If you hate it, then you might not want to hang out with me.
I also don't know who hates it. I think indifferent maybe, but I don't know who actually hates it.
Some people, they're like, please do not bring it up anymore. And I'm like, okay, I'll try. But the fact that you said that just really shows me that you're X number.
I love it. So for those who aren't familiar with what the Enneagram is, and it's been compared to Myers-Briggs, it's been compared to astrology even, or whatever. We love, as humans, we love labels. We love labels. We love categories. We love to, slap a name tag on ourselves and wear it with pride. What is the Enneagram and the theory behind it? Condensed down, obviously. There's a ton of history here, but how would you describe it?
Well, just to tag on to what you said, yes, we're all searching for identity, and we live such busy lives that when somebody gives us a shortcut to understand our own identity, we're like, yes, this gives me words I can say that other people will understand about what's going on inside of me. And so the Enneagram I have found to be one of the most accurate personality tools. So it's just a tool. It is not the end-all be-all of all of life, but it is a really accurate tool. And I actually studied under Suzanne Stabile, and she's out of Dallas, and she's they call her the Enneagram godmother. And she always says, how do I know it's true? Because it's true. And if you know the Enneagram, you're like, yeah, I know it's true because the minute I learn it, I can walk outside and find 10 examples staring me in the face of that is true. So it centers around 9 archetypes that we see in humanity that when put all together create kind of a perfect human, like a perfect balance. And we each have a certain superpower that we cling to. And it's 2 sides of the same coin in that it's our superpower, but then it kind of also becomes our Achilles heel. Because anytime we hold on to only one piece of a puzzle, the other pieces get diminished. And so what the Enneagram is trying to show people is actually not be more of your number. It's actually trying to help you see it. You are naturally this way, so you can let up a little bit. You can bring in other tools from other numbers. You can become more balanced and have more compassion for yourself and others than you would normally have on your own.
And when you say your type of number, how would you describe, we know the different 9 types. I think we're going to link something in the show notes to maybe explain the different 9 types, so we don't have to go through every one of them. But how can you tell one from another? At the core, what is the differentiator between those 9 archetypes? And is it their approach, their outlook, their attitude, when we say personality, what are the elements that you would use to describe that?
The number one thing we're looking for with the Enneagram that makes it really unique is your core motivations. So, I would say, some people would give you a test for the Enneagram and it would be like, would you climb Mount Everest? Yes or no? And you say yes. So they're like, oh, you're an 8. Or, oh, you're at this number. Because only aggressive numbers would do that. And then it's like, well, no. All of us have something that might motivate us to climb Mount Everest. It might be the achievement. It might be the challenge. It might be because everybody else is doing it. It could be so many reasons. And so what we're actually looking at is the motivation of each individual. And so that sets us apart. And then the other amazing thing is the Enneagram also touches on how do you act when you're kind of in an unhealthy space, like you're getting stressed out, you are maxed out, you start to take on a little bit of a different personality type, meshed with your own. And then when you're super healthy, you're thriving, you're growing, you're finding yourself in the sweet spot. Where do you go then? Like, how do you act at your best? So it gives us this full range to where you could have 41s in a room, type ones, and they would all be unique because you're talking about their wings, like the numbers that are next to them and how that influences them. Are they in stress? Are they healthy? How much work have they done? How much life experience or trauma have they had? And you get all of these flavors. So it's more of a watercolor than rigid boxes, and the colors kind of run together in unique ways.
I love that. It's more like a concentration of the formula. It's like there's just a little bit more of that ingredient, but that doesn't mean that you're not a mix of other things. And I was torn. This frustrated me because I took and this probably is already the indicator of what number I was, but I was frustrated taking the test because I was like, I want to be this and I would love to identify as this, but I realize I'm actually this. Like I wanted to be a 7 because I felt like I was. Yeah. I was like, I resonate with this. Like, I don't want to do anything I don't want to do. I want to do things that are fun. And then I realized that like, oh no, but intrinsically, like when challenged and when I'm under these circumstances, I definitely gravitate and I'm grounded in a 3. I know I am.
Yeah.
That is what ultimately drives me, even though I have tendencies to behave like that. We all do. And we all don't want to do things we don't want to do. We all have like inherent human nature. But what I love about the Enneagram is that it really kind of shines a light on yourself and saying, here are your core, again, motivators, but traits. And also like, here's where if you overdo it in excess, it actually can turn negative. It's like everything in moderation, right? But it's like you have a little bit of extra of these things, these ingredients in your brain. So if you pour more into that, it could go negative. And I definitely see how that could happen.
Yeah. And that kind of reminds me. So a lot of people take tests and there are some good tests out there and there's some not good tests out there. But even if you take a test, really, you're just showing what you think of yourself, because you're only answering with as much self-awareness as you have of yourself. Right. So the great thing about the Enneagram is that nobody gets to tell you what you are. It's all about self-discovery. There's not really a shortcut because you could take a test. Same. I took a test, a really good, thorough test, and I had 3 scores that were tied. And it's like, well, what do I do with that? And so I picked one and just began to kind of see, does this fit? Do I see this in my day-to-day? And I was in kind of a negative space. And so as I got healthier and in a better place, I was like, oh, this doesn't fit at all. Like, this feels horrible. Like, and realized that was my stress arrow number. And so I was living that out and my scores were super high and I was very melancholy and woe is me and I'm broken. And then as I got healthy, I realized, no, what I love is like structure and rules and like doing everything the right way. And things are very black and white. And I'm actually not artistic. Well, I am a little artistic, but like my clothing in my house are so basic, So I was like, oh, I'm not a 4. I am definitely more of a 1. And I get that 4-ness going on sometimes, but it's not my core of like the consistent piece of my strength. So yeah, a lot of people mistype.
And it's about that blend of understanding that like it's not one or the other and it's not absolute. Now, in the context of business, right? Because this is something this came up, and I think the personality test, this is like a very common thing we do at work in corporate, right? We figure out what personality, like, are you a driver? Are you a whatever, and those are always fun because I think they're really fun to like put yourself, it's almost like the Harry Potter houses. Like you put yourself in the houses and talk about it. And it's, we just love this like tribal thing. I feel like we also bond with each other when we find out what we are. And, but at work though, here's the cool thing is what I love about the Enneagram for a business owner or for a manager is, and we were talking about this a little bit in the pre-interview, is like how it drives compassion. So can you unpack that a little bit in terms of how you can use that and use the Enneagram in your business or in your job effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. So we teach Enneagram at Work workshops for this very reason, because you bring your personality with you everywhere you go. And the way you relate is always the way you relate. Like, it's the same. And so the beautiful thing about talking about the Enneagram in your workplace and is that compassion piece, that the Enneagram is trying to give you a mirror of who you are. And so, there's that thing that you're always doing that you don't want to do. You set a resolution to not do it, or it comes up in your review, every year, that you're a little bit this way, or you have this habit, and you can get so down on yourself because we see our dark side. We're trying to hide it, but we see it. And the Enneagram is saying, like, hey, like, here's a picture. Like, these are your gifts and these are your struggles. And instead of every time you have a struggle feeling shame or guilt or anger or fear, you can say, oh, that's like a red flag, like waving at me to say, we're stressed, like we're going to the unhealthy side. What is a tool that I can use to bring me back up into a healthy space? And the Enneagram, if we were going to go into it further, you can see how it might be your stress number or it might be your health number, gives you tools that counterbalance when you're overdoing your specific gift. But then it also gives you compassion for other people, which for me was the greatest gift, because I can be a little black and white. I've come a long way thanks to the Enneagram. But if someone is late for work, late for a meeting, or they talk too much in a meeting, or they ask endless questions in a meeting, or they're super quiet and they never talk to anyone, we can take those things personally and begin to make assumptions about why they're like that and how personal it is to us, what an affront it is to us. We make a lot of assumptions that create further conflict. But the Enneagram shows us there are 8 other lenses other than your own that people are seeing the world and interacting with the world, and that maybe what feels personal is actually just their personality. Like, maybe it's doesn't have anything to do with you. And when you start to see that, for instance, 5s can be very withdrawn. They're excellent workers because they just want to go in their office and get it done. And they're great at details, they're great at research, but they're not always super social. And so when they're not actively working on themselves to get out of their office, to go talk to people, there are other people that are more relational that might get a sour taste in their mouth around that person. But when you understand that this is how they tick, you can make so much more space for each person to be who they are and celebrate the strengths, and then have great tools to negotiate conflict when it does arise.
Definitely. And, we think about the motivators that drive each, type.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that they have certain goals.
Right.
So for example, like there isn't an introverted and extroverted type. There isn't are there any types on the Enneagram where, a lot of folks try to extend the labels, right? And say,
yes,
3s make good this,
yes,
5s make good this. I don't, and tell me if you agree, Lindsey, I don't particularly like extending that label that far by saying you would be a good, list of careers here, because who knows, right? Who knows, like that. Now you're getting into like professional trade skills, and let's just unpack that for a second. Enneagram type versus skills and traits. Like, how do these interact?
So we actually have that in our Enneagram at Work workshop. One of our very first points is people always ask us, so what number should I hire for X position? And our answer is always a mature person, a healthy person, a person who is open to feedback, who wants to grow personally and professionally. And that can be any type. Yes, there are types that are more aggressive and assertive, more high energy. And so we might think, oh, those people make great leaders, and they can, but they can also be the people who bulldoze the whole team, who make everyone feel insecure and unworthy. So if I can give you a quick story, my husband is a 9, and he is the 9est 9 I have ever met. Like, He is so laid back. He makes everyone feel at ease. And his first ever job was for a company that shall not be named. That is horrible. Just like a giant, everybody's a number. You're nobody. You start at the bottom. And the guy told him, I never hire anyone who's not type A. So I don't think I should hire you, but I have no reason not to. So I'm going to hire you, but I'm just going to warn you that you're going to hate it. And he did hate it, but that wasn't really because he was a 9. But he advanced in that company faster than anyone else had in our region because it was a breath of fresh air for their customers. Where they were used to people who were pushy and direct and aggressive, they got someone who was gentle and kind and good at listening, but could also be firm and still get the job done. And so I have seen that in his life over and over. Wherever he goes, he can start at the bottom. Quickly, he rises up into leadership because people feel so at ease around him. And I heard a podcast, a really famous podcast, by the way, in the Enneagram world, say, 3s, they should probably never really rise above middle management. And I wrote them, and I'm not that kind of person who writes in a negative comment, but I was like, how dare you? If we all start to act that way, where we're saying, here, take this personality test, and that determines whether you get a job or not, we would be missing countless opportunities to find gifts that we didn't even know we needed. Or like you said, skills. If you have the education, the training, the experience, and you're a person who is open to feedback and growth, there's nothing you couldn't do, in your field. So some people do prefer to have more spotlight and some prefer to have less spotlight. But I really believe that every type is capable of achieving their goals and desires.
Yeah. And I know that we typically typecast the types. So one example that I think you were using is an 8, which is the challenger, someone who's not afraid to speak their mind. And that can be, again, when they're mature and they can do it professionally and they can do it artfully. And they can also, those types of people can make good leaders when they're healthy because they can command a room and they can motivate because they probably have the gift of gab. They probably are willing to say the things people aren't willing to say and be someone that you can follow because wow, they're really vocal. Versus they could also be in an unhealthy way, aggressive, bulldozing. They could, they could basically disregard everyone else's opinion, right? It comes down to maturity, which is why I love that you brought that up, that no matter what motivates you, you still have to be mature in how you conduct yourself with others. Let me just ask you, Lindsey, about, it's about knowing your own type. But also I feel like there's a responsibility, especially as a manager or business owner or entrepreneur, if you're going to hire a team, you need to be versed in the other types as well and know how they interact, right? So it's not just about, oh, I'm a 3 and this is my favorite. I'm a 3. That's just how I am. And using it as a crutch too and getting people to acclimate to you. Let's talk about that. How does that help interactions thrive in the workplace or in your business?
Yes. Those of us who are in the Enneagram world, we always say the Enneagram is not an excuse for bad behavior.
Right.
You can never blame that on the Enneagram because that is the opposite of what it's encouraging you to do. And even tied in with what you said about the 8, the best of every type is the person you can't type because they are bringing so much balance. They know how to use their gift and they also know how to restrain themselves from overusing it, that it brings something beautiful to the table. And you might not be able to say oh, they're an 8. Some of the best 8s I know, I would have never guessed that they were 8 unless they had told me. But then when it comes to your team, I do think, we don't type our children. We also shouldn't type our coworkers. We let them have that self-discovery. But if you have an understanding for both your children and your coworkers of what are the 9 types, I have even a general understanding of these are the 9 types. These are the numbers that are maybe more sensitive. They need more affirmation. These are the types that would rather me be really direct, really honest, really to the point. Just knowing a little bit about that, when you bring in someone to your team, they're going to give you some energy. They're going to show you, they're probably going to give to you what they want to receive. So if they're kind and warm and, they're really helpful and sacrificing, well, they're probably appreciative of kindness and warmth in return. So we can navigate our teams by being aware that each person is going to need something a little different from me, and I can cater to a degree how I interact with them in a way that's going to make them feel valued and seen and appreciated. And it's going to create this great workplace environment for the whole team.
Yeah. And sometimes it's about really knowing how you're reacting in a stressful situation or what's triggering you and how someone else would react to that. So there's a lot of depth there in terms of, okay, this is bugging me. Or maybe let's use the 8 as the example again and say like the 8 could speak up and say something, but then realizing I'm surrounded by folks who probably, and again, you don't type them, but you go, I'm not really surrounded by a lot of people who are like me, and going, maybe I should pump the brakes for a second and like read the room is like how I would put it. Like you have to read the room and go, is this behavior welcome in this space right now? It's what I want to do. It's what I am naturally, instinctively gravitating towards doing or saying, but how will it be received? Like the self-awareness is insanely powerful when you're, especially when you're in business. And this also goes for, by the way, with your team, with your clients, and with marketing.
Yes.
It's with marketing too. It's all in how you project. Could you talk a little bit about, not just in the workplace with a team, but what other uses are there for the Enneagram in terms of self-awareness and really utilizing that for your own benefit?
Oh gosh, I'm like, how would you not use it?
Yeah, you can use it in every interaction, basically,
family,
friends, but in business especially. Like I'm just thinking about it now, like marketing, like your ad, your Facebook ad, your Instagram reel can give off a certain like a giveaway of what your number is, or you could potentially, you could even outwardly say, this is how I, this is my number, this is how I behave, right? Like, there's so many different ways that you can actually utilize it.
Yeah, they say that there are more than likely more 6s than any other number in the world. And these are like loyal, they want to be a part of a team or a tribe, they're kind of, we call them pack animals, but their core kind of struggle is fear. And they have all this like fear and uncertainty, worst case scenario thinking. And so if you look at marketing today, a lot of our marketing is fear-based. Like you must have this tool for your child or they might die in their sleep. Like extreme things like or if you eat this, you will have these great benefits. Or I remember I read a book about sleep for babies and it was like, if you don't do this, like basically your child will grow up to be an unhealthy adult. Like, whereas if you do this sleep method, they'll be a valedictorian and they'll do extracurricular activities. You're like, what? Like, we're talking about a baby and their sleep, but that's marketing is if we know a lot of people are motivated by fear, well, then let's capitalize on the fear. And so, and that's a negative. We don't want people doing that, but it does show the power of marketing and that you want to be aware if you're trying to build your brand, that you're making it to where it's palatable and, inviting for all the different types, which is another reason to have a diverse team as far as personalities and types and strengths, not just, you mentioned you're a 3, like you wouldn't want to work with all 3s, because then you have no outside voice telling you, well, actually, that doesn't appeal to me at all,
No, and we'd all work till midnight. Like nobody would tell me, no one would tell me to like go have dinner.
Yeah. And they wouldn't stay because they'd be like, being second and third and fourth, like that's not really my thing. So I'm going to go start my own podcast. And then you'd be out of your team. So yeah,
exactly. So it really, and when everyone can kind of reach their own goals and like fulfill those motivations, that's when I think that like beautiful synergy happens. What do you think? What are your recommendations? Because we don't want to discriminate. We don't want to typecast. We don't want to label too much, right? So when we have people come into our ecosystem, whether that be a client or a team member, for example, someone on my team for my business, asking them what their type is that like, a little bit too pushy? Do we ask them to take this quiz? Do we, how do we figure out what people are so we can show up better for them and do that in a respectful way.
Yes. I think if you are the lead person in your business, you've got a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs, then you can absolutely set the tone for, we want to know each other. We want to work together the best we can. And so we're going to all take this test and we're just going to be curious about each other and discuss it further. And maybe you have a professional work day and you go through, you could bring someone like myself in and we could talk about that as your team. As far as your clients, depending on the world that you're working within, some people might think you're super kooky. If you are like, oh, by the way, what Enneagram number are you? They're like, what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah.
But you can always be curious about other people. And I think that is something that we are missing in our polarized environment right now, is we're not curious about, why do you feel that way? Why are you reacting that way? Why are you scared of that? Why does that make you happy? So you could have that with your clients. Like when you're doing a client intake, having questions that aren't overtly Enneagram, but bring up some of those points. Like, how do you best like to collaborate? How do you like to be communicated with, and with what frequency? Do they want you to just be off to the races and tell them when it's done? Or do they want weekly check-ins, and you can give them that for yourself as well. If you have more awareness of, this is how I typically work. Does that sound like it would work for you? And then just being curious and open that there's maybe things that you're not going to see. And so try to get those things, dig those things up before they become a problem.
Yeah, and volunteering information about how you work, because I
Yeah.
think the more self-aware you are and say, this is my tendency, and I've done this with my team as well, where I actually use it and say, I'm an Enneagram 3, this is what this means.
Yeah.
And I'm not telling you this because I am a 3, I'm telling you this because it's true. Like you said, like it's true. And I say, if there was a 3+, I'd be a 3+. And it's this is what motivates me, and this is my natural tendency. And this is what I will need from you to be successful, but this is also what I can give you to be successful. And we actually have those conversations in our team regularly when we actually bring it. I've brought this up to you before that I have a team member who I had her take the thing, and now she is like, oh, that's my 5 again, creepy.
Yeah.
So there's an awareness, and we can kind of joke about it and remind each other of our own motivations, our own types. And I think that's super healthy to actually be out in the open and talking about that and saying, that's where I'm coming from. And remember, like you said, curiosity, we do not have enough curiosity about each other anymore. We're all in our own world, living autobiographically, everyone is a character in our main story. And when you can shift that, that is when I think you make a really big impact.
Yes. We talk about it in my workplace as well. We're big. Everybody here is like Enneagram savvy.
Yeah.
And one thing I love is that it gives us vocabulary. So even if we're not using our number, it's easy for me to say like, hey, that felt really assertive and I felt a little bit run over, or like you didn't give me full space to speak. But I'm assuming the best. I'm assuming best intent of like, I know you were just excited and that's just how you are, but I need you to scale it back a little bit. Or your questions are so valuable, but we only have this limited time. Could you prioritize the questions you want to ask about the project? Things like that, where if we're all open and aware, we can be so much more gentle in the way that we handle one another so that things flow smoothly and we avoid a lot of these big conflicts or like losing employees and things like that, because it's safe for everyone to be who they are.
Yeah. And along the curiosity front, I think that right now, especially since the pandemic, and this has been kind of a theory I've had, is when all this happened and all of us, our lives, our lifestyles all got shook up, we went into survival mode because we were uncertain. So all of us kind of reserved and said, okay, I need to protect my home. I need to protect myself. Even our bodies, our minds went into self-preservation. And we almost thought everyone else was an enemy. I mean, literally, we were forced to be away from other people, looking at them as toxicity, right?
Yes.
Like if I'm too close to another person, they're right. So I think mentally we started associating with that sentiment. And I feel like our brain, and I have no science behind this, by the way. I'm an accountant by trade, guys. But I feel like naturally we all kind of went inward. And then now it's like, oh, I forgot how to interact with other people, or that other people exist, or that they're just like a thing behind a Zoom call. These are real human beings.
Yeah.
And when we got into that self-preservation, we really, we dug into what will keep me alive. And we have to come out of that. We have to start going, what will be better for everyone else? And this is also where the polarization comes in. Like, we're not being challenged. We're not being presented other viewpoints. We're not forced to interact with folks who don't agree with us. And that, I think, is going to be really dangerous, because it's just going to increase the potency of what you currently feel, believe, and act like, without any sort of mix of, have you thought of it this way? Yeah. And that's that. I'm worried for our society in that regard, but I'm also hopeful, because I feel like there are tools out there to help us with that.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like I could go on for hours about what you just said, of just how much we need self-awareness and awareness of others, because others are not the enemy. You know, like, just because they have a different political view or different way they handle something does not make them the enemy. It makes them somebody you should be curious about and try to understand even more, because the more you understand somebody who's so different from you, the more balance and completion you bring to yourself, you know, because the more we go into our corners, and become more and more and more like ourselves, and we have an echo chamber of people who are just like us, yes, the more dangerous all of our like Achilles heels become, because we have no balance, no counterbalance to, you know, we all need each other for sure.
Totally agree. So if our listeners want to implement this, Lindsey, and put this into action and really find a way to integrate this into their business, their work, their life, tell us about the different ways that they can do that and how you can help them with that.
Yes. Well, if you want to use me, I work for a nonprofit called Love Thy Neighborhood. And we have a podcast. We have two podcasts, but the main one that I'm involved in is called the Enneacast. And we discuss the Enneagram every season from a different perspective. So we've talked about, last season was actually the Enneagram at work. And we talked all about, what is it like when this number is a supervisor? What might it be like when this person is just a team player, you know, and how are their strengths and weaknesses going to be playing out in the workplace? And so you can go listen to those episodes, but we also offer workshops. We offer like a basic 101 where we'll just walk you through all 9 types. And then we also offer a half-day Enneagram at work, where we're specifically talking about how these numbers are playing out at work. And then we have discussion where teams you can either break up into groups, or if you're already a small team, where we're going to really talk about, what does this look like in your day? How is this showing up? And so we'll have scenarios that we create, and everybody can say the thing that we never say, you know, like, I did this because of this, but I didn't want to say that because we needed to get into this meeting and we needed to move on. But we help each other see our motivations, and then it's like, oh. And so you can find all that at lovethyneighborhood.org. We have a place to, you know, contact us or book us. And we would love to work with more organizations, more companies, just to help people have that openness and compassion for one another so that their businesses can thrive.
And thank you so much, Lindsey, for being on the show and for shedding light on that and spreading that message, because I think that it's really, really needed right now, is really infusing a lot more humanity into what we do in our businesses, and remembering that we're all doing this to make an impact. We're all doing this for others, to leave a legacy, and to not just shine ourselves, but to help others shine as well. And this is one of the many tools you can use to help increase your skill set in that area. So thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.